My friend Mick was curled up in the bed like a child dying of cancer. I was holding his hand and he looked up at me with one eye, and we just held each other's gaze for what felt like the longest time. That time had stopped, and we were just sort of floating together. And then he sort of popped up with a little burst of energy and said, I got my last rites. And I said, so you're all set, right? And 2 days later, he died, and in the way that he wanted, and kind of in the manner of what he lived, because he really dictated that he wanted to go fast. And what I felt in those moments when we were looking at each other was really that kind of pure love and acceptance. And the reason why I'm talking about that is we don't really talk about that in relation to executive presence and being there in the moment. There's so much talk about not being here and not wanting to be here and what it means to be in the moment. And yet it's so hard for people. But I think if you take the emphasis off yourself and you love others first and give them that kind of unconditional love, then it's returned. And so when you give people acceptance first, like we're always looking for acceptance, like accept me, love me, have me belong. But if you switch it and you give that kind of acceptance first to your audience, if you're doing a media interview or a presentation, and you're sending out that message of complete acceptance and non-judgment, which is really a hard thing, but especially the non-judgment part, then that is automatically reciprocated. People follow your lead. If you feel comfortable with yourself, people feel comfortable in your presence. It was Johnson who said something like, be like an old shoe, comfortable. And so, in being like that old shoe and comfortable in your own self, then you give permission to people to be more open. And I had a client once who, oh my gosh, she was like the love bunny. She just gave people, like, I don't know how she did it, but people just loved on her. And I was like, gosh, what's she doing? And that's what she was. She was like open and accepting and loving. And then people just automatically connected to her like a magnet. So when you're developing presence, instead of thinking about it's a technique or it's a methodology, it's really about this kind of mindset and embodiment of this kind of acceptance first of others before you step onto that stage. And I remember Lee Glickstein, who started Speaking Circles. He was a client of mine a long time ago, and he offered to have me take one of his classes. And at first I refused because I'm an introvert. And then I thought, gosh, this is crazy. Here he is offering me a 3-day training. So I accepted with much trepidation. And I was frightened. And I remember talking to him about it. I said, I'm really frightened to take your class. I mean, it's so intimate. And he goes, you then are thinking of yourself as separate. I'm like, yeah. He said, so when you're thinking of yourself as separate, then that takes you away from connecting to people. I know it is really hard, though, to think of yourself where we are separate beings, but we're all connected at the same time. And that didn't really lessen my fear, to be quite frank, but I did it anyway. And I remember thinking consciously over and over again while I was in that seminar about not being separate and that I was already accepted and that I accepted myself. So that's a place of beginning to begin to develop your personal presence, your executive presence is to start from that point of giving first, receiving next.